Well, thanks very much, Sharon and friends. I begin by also acknowledging the traditional owners of the land on which we meet and pay my respect to elders past, present and emerging. And on behalf of our great party, recommit to the implementation of the Uluru Statement from the Heart in full. Friends, what Sharon just said, 12th to 50th over the period of this government, is an indictment on their record. The fact that it began, of course, way back in 2013 with the appointment of just one woman to the cabinet and the self-appointment of Tony Abbott, remarkably, as the Minister for the Status of Women. Though when you start off that way, it shouldn't be of any great shock that you don't advance the cause of gender equality. But gender equality isn't just about women. Gender equality is about the nature of our society. When we have economic equality, we will all be better off for it. A fairer society is a better society. And that is something that is firmly entrenched in Labor. And since we last gathered here, you might notice there's a different wall down there. Our heroes, the people who are the first of their kind, whether it be the first Cabinet Minister, the first Speaker, the first representatives, the first Indigenous women, or the first Labor Prime Minister, or the first Prime Minister, my friend Julia Gillard. It has always been Labor that have crashed through. And Labor will have, I'm very confident, if we're successful in the election, if you have a look at who our candidates are and where they're running, including women running in safe seats, as well as in seats we hold, as well as in seats that we hope to win that we don't currently hold. I'm confident that if we're successful in May, whenever it is, if ever they get around to calling this election, that the Prime Minister said he was in the campaign last October. He certainly has stopped governing. Then we will have 50% representation in our caucus. And that's a good thing, because that reflects the diversity of Australia in terms of gender. But it will also be far more representative as well if you look at the range of candidates from diverse backgrounds that will be far more reflective of the Australian population than the current government. Today, on the day that I'll deliver tonight, Labor's reply to the federal budget, which is a speech. It's not a full alternative budget. We'll have a lot more to say each and every day between now and polling day, whether it be May 14 or May 21. Today, it is important that we once again gather here to have Labor's Women's Budget Statement. And I want to thank and congratulate Tanya and Sharon and Annika and everyone else who has had an important role in putting this together, along with our economic team of Jim and Katie, led by Jim and Katie, but with so many others as well. This began, of course, in 2014 because the government abolished the Women's Budget Statement from the process. And we felt at that time that we needed to step into the void which was there. But with an election just a few weeks away, I do want to give you a sense of how things will change under a Labor government. The first is that we'll introduce a national gender equality strategy to guide whole of government actions to achieve gender equality. Of course, we have our target of equal representation by 2025, but I reckon we'll get there before then. Labor also has embraced the recommendation from the Jenkins Review to champion a new 10-year strategy with specific actions to advance gender equality, diversity and inclusion among parliamentarians. But we must also address the decline in women's economic security that resulted from COVID. And we'll set up an independent Women's Economic Security Task Force. This is important. The rise in insecure work has particularly had an impact on women. Women are more likely to work in insecure work, and it's feminised industries that are more likely to be underpaid. Think about the rhetoric of this government about the heroes of the pandemic: our childcare workers, our aged care workers, our cleaners. They are all feminised industries. And it's no accident there's a relationship between that and their underpayment. It's just a fact. And it's something that we need to address. We need to address the nature of work. Now, the government has, I'm surprised there isn't one today, I don't think, that I've seen. But over in recent days, we've had these bizarre sort of policy analysis based upon things that aren't ours, with costings from Simon Birmingham about various policies that aren't ours. Assumption. There was one headline in one of the papers I saw the other day. I think it was $66 billion budget blowout. Labor must respond. It's not our policy, but apparently we've got to respond. That's what we have to deal with. Our childcare policy, we put in the first budget reply. It was the centrepiece. It's not welfare. It's economic reform. It's about workforce participation. It's about lifting productivity. It's also about giving our youngest Australians the best start in life and the opportunity that comes from early learning. Early learning, not minding, early learning. International best practice is where it's all going. Why is it that so many families will say to you, we're better off now because little Johnny or little Mary turned 5 and started primary school? Because the state recognises and no one questions that once a child enters kindergarten, governments, we as a society, have a responsibility to look after them, to provide them with an education. But what we know is that by the time they get there, most of their brain development has already happened. Overwhelmingly, it's already happened. But for this government, that's just a cost. We know that it actually increases the size of the economy. We know that the flow-on effect of women being penalised, and it is largely women being penalised for working a 4th or a 5th day, is that not only are they not able to advance in their workplace, and therefore the business suffers from lower productivity, their retirement incomes are less as well. So you're building in generational gender inequality, and you're undermining productivity and economic growth, which is why every business sector is calling for this. But I listened on Tuesday night. Crickets from this government. Crickets. They've stolen a lot of our policies. Why didn't they steal that one? Because they just don't get it at the end of the day. They just don't get it. Well, under our policy, and there'll be some further processes in that, no family will be worse off, but overwhelmingly families will be better off, and that will make a difference to our national economy. The other issue I want to talk about is jobs. Now, we have a secure Australian jobs plan. I announced it almost, I announced in January of last year, a long time ago now. Government doesn't talk about it. They say, oh, well, we haven't really got it. We outlined it in great detail. Part of that Secure Australian Jobs Plan was a plan to reduce the gender pay gap. It was a plan for 10 days paid domestic and family violence leave. It was a plan for transparency in terms of wages, in terms of... one of the ways that could be easily fixed in terms of the gender pay gap is for transparency. How is it that we all know women who aren't allowed to tell people how much they're paid? What sort of industrial circumstance? And you think to yourself, why is that the case? It's so that the inequality that's there in terms of bargaining power, etc., doesn't get exposed. We need to deal with that. We need to deal with casualisation of the workforce. Why is there no proper definition of these measures? Why is it that secure work isn't even recognised as an objective of the Fair Work Act? It's just extraordinary. I want to quote Sam Mostyn, one of our business leaders, who said at the National Press Club last year, she said this. She noted the care economy is powered by women who are often underpaid if they're paid at all. And she went on to say, this care economy has accomplished extraordinary things and we need to start valuing, maintaining and investing in it with the same energy and focus as we would any arterial road. And she's absolutely right. Absolutely right. So it's not just the fantastic female trade unionists who are here. Michelle O'Neill, the President of the ACTU. Welcome, Michelle. The fact the leadership of the National Trade Union Movement is Michelle and Sally McManus, two good friends of mine, but two people absolutely passionate to the rights of working women, as well as, of course, every working person in this country, is a good thing. But women business leaders as well are speaking out, are saying we need to do better. We need also to address the issue of shelter and safety. We're now, the centrepiece of the second budget reply was our Housing Australia Future Fund. You know, again, crickets the other night. We know now why. Sitting there the other night, I thought they haven't said anything about social housing or affordable housing or emergency housing, or, you know, they've said a bit about home buying. We now know it's because if you're struggling to pay your rent, just go buy a house. Why didn't we think of that? Hey, it's really easy. It's really easy. Talk about Scott Morrison's let them eat cake moment. It's really what it was. Just showed how out of touch he is. Well, our Housing Australia Future Fund will build 20,000 additional social housing units, but 4,000 of those will be set aside for women and children escaping domestic violence. We'll add $100 million on top of that for crisis accommodation. We know that too many women, sometimes with their kids, escaping domestic violence, are forced to sleep in their car or couch surf, or worse still, return to a dangerous circumstance. We'll also address the issue of safety of women in paid work. Now, in contrast to the government, how hard is this? The Jenkins Review has 55 recommendations. Just say yes to all of them. That is what we will do. Including in that, is the responsibility of employers. It's not too much to ask for, that employers had that responsibility. And if you look at page 9 of this document, a really clear one-pager about how a Labor government, 5 ways a Labor government will do better. Starts off, Australian women don't want special treatment, they just want equality. Just want equality. Delivering cheaper childcare, Women's Economic Security Task Force, closing the gender pay gap at work, providing the national leadership and investment needed to end family and domestic and sexual violence, and taking real action to stop sexual harassment. So those issues are all absolutely critical, And we will, of course, in terms of our shelter and safety policy, we will back in the changes that have been announced on Tuesday night. In Tuesday night's budget, there was some additional funding. We'll match that, but we'll add that to what we've got already. We'll add that to the commitments that we've already made, which is really important. Yeah. Friends, we seek government not to change where we sit, whether we sit in this room or the room down the other end of the corridor. Not to change who's in the white cars, to change the country for the better, to make it fairer, to make it more equal, to lift up our sights higher. We can do better as a nation. And if we're not advancing, the rest of the world goes past us. That's what's happened. That's why we've gone from 12th to 50th. I think Australia is the greatest country on earth, but with a better government, we can be an even better country. And part of that is moving on gender equality. We have practical policies that we've put forward in all of those areas that will make a positive difference. And I will be working each and every day, and I thank those of you in this room who aren't journalists, although a bit of help or even handedness will do going forward, is something that we will be striving to do as a movement, because it's only Labor, when you look at the great advances that have been made, it's always Labor. Yeah. It's always Labor that makes the big change. This mob have no agenda for their third term. I looked at the front page of one of the broadsheet, there's only one now, today, and I thought, okay, it's Thursday morning, and the big headlines about what's in Albanese's budget reply. I thought, well, that budget sunk. 24 hours later, there's no agenda. There's no agenda for this government. We will have a positive agenda, and we will change the country for the better if we receive support of the Australian people. It's up to every one of us in the Labor Party, whether we're parliamentarians or supporters, to make sure that we don't waste the opportunity that we have between now and May. Thanks very much.